Welcome to the Balancing Ambitions podcast. I'm your host, Kim Menapace. You are not alone in your pursuit to balance family life, work, side hustles, and taking care of yourself. Balance is not easy to achieve by any means, but we can all work to get better at it together by sharing our stories, tips, and wisdom. Let's dive into this week's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of the Balancing Ambitions podcast. I am so excited to have Kim Fitzpatrick on the show today. I met Kim a little over a year ago at a retreat with one of our mentors. And I just, even before I met her, I just remember this beautiful light and energy I saw from her Instagram account that I had been following for a little bit of time. So I'll quickly read her bio and then we'll dive into an amazing conversation that's going to be jam-packed with insights and wisdom and how to be an elite performance. I'm so excited for today's episode. So Kim Fitzpatrick is a powerhouse leadership and business strategist, transformational speaker, and CEO of Legacy by Kim, with a dynamic career that spans building multiple seven-figure companies and mentoring thousands of women worldwide. Kim brings unmatched energy, strategy, and heart to everything she touches. She's the creator of the Awaken Her Clarity Mastermind and the Legacy Council, designed for visionary women ready to lead with clarity and legacy. A certified executive coach and sought after mentor, Kim is also the best selling author of Be Her Now, a global favorite morning journal rooted in intentional habit building. As co host of Fitz Life Unfiltered and a global keynote speaker, Kim's voice and impact resonates from boardrooms to big stages. With deep roots in health, wellness, and aging, and over 20 years of corporate leadership experience, she brings a rare blend of soul, strategy, and legacy building to everyone she serves. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. I always get I get very humbled hearing that back because it's like, yeah, all right, we've done a few things. And so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, and how do you summarize your life in 150 words? It's just or characters. Noticed that you did a very good job concisely iterating a jam-packed life so far, and I can't wait to unpack different phases of it together with you on this show.
I appreciate that so much. It's so true, right? It's like I always think about that, even like when you think about this may sound like mortality here getting into it, but it's even like how do you sum up a life? Like even when you think about at the end of your life or in the middle of your life. And I always think about that when I like visit graveyards and headstones. And it's like, what would you really want it to say? And I always think about that with the bio is it's like, what's the most impact? Right? What's the most impact you've had versus like what you've achieved necessarily, but in terms of like, how can we put that into the impact or the mark you've left in the world? And I always feel like it's so phenomenal. And then I always love looking at that dash right in between the two dates. And it's like, isn't that what's the most important? Like, what are you doing in between the dates of the day you were born and the day that whenever we aren't able to be here anymore? It's like, what are we doing? So it's like, that just juices me up to really think about that.
Wow, what an incredible way to think about that. And my mind goes in two directions. One is we just sold our old primary, and I know you did something similar last year as well, but we had a old historic graveyard behind our house with Revolutionary War heroes and founders of our town. So not an active graveyard with people going to funerals today. It's something from 100 years ago. And just thinking about all of the stories that are wrapped up in that historic graveyard in our town. And then also how loaded some of those words are: mother,
Mhm.
daughter, husband. And that there's just a life, more than a lifetime of stories just in those singular words. And then what else is in there? What are you doing to leave a legacy for your community and have an impact there? Those are also beautiful things that I think about with our library in our town is a Carnegie building. And just thinking about how decades and decades later, that's still leaving a lasting impact on our whole country, never mind my town and that beautiful historic library building too.
Wow, I love that. I love that stuff. And I actually have like full blown chills even when you so like succinctly said those words, right? Those titles, mother, daughter, sister, father, whatever that is, right? Like if you think about that, so many of the roles we all put on or the titles or the badges we wear. But if you think about that too, Kim, it's like, and I really appreciated what you said about the stories that go with that. I think that's such a distinction because so often people just think about, well, I'm a mother and this is it, but it's like no, there's these stories that are woven into every fiber of your being. That was so beautiful for anyone listening to really think about that. think about the stories that are attached to the titles we give ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think that actually makes it even more meaningful. I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. So let's dive in here. Let's first start with what you do today. What's your current career?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I love this question. So I feel like I've worn like so many name badges from when I was 13 years of age. So when I was 13 years of age, I've always worked multiple jobs, which is so fascinating to me. And I think that's just, I've always been interested in a lot of things. But I started working when I was 13, right? Babysitting, camp counseling, all the things, working for the town, lifeguarding, all the things, right? I always had took great pride in working and service. If you look back at all of my roles, every single one of them have service rooted at the heart, right? It was always community, was always serving, it was always helping people in generally groups. And, I love that part. So fast forward me to today, I really believe that I'm living in my Dharma. For a long time, I used to think I'm going to be a camp counselor when I grow up. Like that was my dream. And now I'm like, I kind of am. I feel like I'm a bit of a very exclusive, high end, like, executive, certified executive leadership, life, and business. I don't even like calling myself necessarily a coach because I really believe I'm a guide, right? As a coach, you are not the hero. The person that you serve is. And it's my job to bring out the best in you and the potential in you because I believe that most people don't even know their full potential, but they have it inside. So my job is to help unlock that through really powerful dialogue, introspection, all the things that come in between of just like whether it be strategy or systems or just permission to be and relax into who you want to be and to dream. So that's really my role. My role now is I'm a high level coach. I absolutely love it. I've had the honor of serving tens of thousands of women, whether it be in their health and their wellness and their mindset, and really helping to guide them with tools and really figuring out what is living a life of longevity. What does optimal aging look like for each unique person? And what do you need in order to really figure that out? And, so whether that be from a career perspective, whether that be from a mindset and routine perspective, whether that be from honoring your sleep. We talked about that before we jumped on this podcast, and it's like I've become a sleep ninja, and so it's just really fun to see how I've really iterated, Kim, over the years, and how that's come into my practice, really giving that permission back to women to just number one feel really empowered and proud, to dispel the shame and the judgment because we are our own worst critics and nothing good comes from that. And then the third thing is just to really build out, I would say, more of like this idea of legacy and this idea of clarity is really important to me in my work.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. And I had never thought of that word guide versus coach and how there's a very important distinction between those two. And I think of guide as being more spiritual. What came to mind was guardian angel. And I
Mhm.
like that because you said coach, you share the glory when your team wins the Super Bowl. The
Yeah.
coach also gets the praise for that as well as the players, but you're really just helping harness people's potential and talent and gifts and giving them questions and having them think and pause to decide, are they on the path they want to be on, and if not, asking another probing questions and doing other things to help them find their way to
Yeah.
their highest potential.
I love that. And it's so fun. I have these wings on my arms. So when you said that, like I was like, oh, I love that. Every tattoo has a meaning, but it's like, I really love what you just said because I think a lot of times we stay locked in certain paths because of whether it be society, whether it be of what we've always thought we had to do, whether or not it's just, well, this is just my life. This is just the way I am. And I believe we're getting out of that in today's day and age, and we have to, because if you're staying in a job that or a role or even, I'm going to dare say it, a relationship that you are going crazy in, you are actually not living your assignment, but we have to understand that higher that alignment in your own personal life and knowing what the distinction of the alignment is and depending on where you're at, that's the higher the assignment. And I love that idea of like, if you can feel in alignment and know what that means like for you can achieve whatever you want. But if you're living in this constant state of disbelief or complaining or lower vibration, you'll never attract what's meant for you.
Came to mind when you said if you're in a job or relationship that you're going crazy in, the opposite I think of is peace. And that's something I found a lot of when I've had struggles through just being out of alignment with myself, being in cognitive dissonance. And when
Yes.
I was able to identify it, become aware of it, diagnose where the root cause of it was, I found such peace when I identified it and then took action against it. And
Yeah.
that's what I think about when you said going crazy. I was thinking, what's the opposite of that? That's peace. You can live in peace in all
Yeah.
of those things,
Oh,
in
wow.
your career, in your relationships. But
Mhm.
people think it's normal to be living in chaos and having this misalignment. I think that if you are so used to that, you just don't know any other way.
Mm. I heard this quote and I'm not sure who the author of it is, but I love it. And it's like you're so used to living in chaos. And they even go so far as like hell. You're so used to living in hell or chaos that you don't understand that heaven is available for you too. And it's beautiful, right? It's like, what's the difference? And I think when I think of heaven, I think of peace. So it's such a beautiful similarity there. But it's like, what would that feel like for you? And I think one of the things that's so powerful is just giving yourself permission to actually ask, well, what's the alternative? Because so many people saying, I have not felt 100% for the last 5 weeks. I had a cold and then I was on antibiotics. Our daughter had surgery. I was living in the hospital with her. Like things have been kind of wild. And all I kept saying is, I don't like feeling like this. And I was going against all the things I want to say. It's like, no, no, no. And then I finally, yesterday, it took me, maybe it was yesterday, no, it was the day before yesterday. I was like, I want to feel great. I do not consent to feeling like crap anymore. And next morning, Kim, I swear, like, hand to God, I woke up feeling amazing. And I was like, right. Because for 5 weeks, I was like, you don't feel good. You're not feeling great. You love feeling good, but you do. We can easily get pulled into a past pattern or thought or cycle when life is unfolding for you, right? And then as soon as I said, no, I've got this. I want to feel great. I can operate with a cold. Come on. Put your big girl pants on. And I flipped my mindset. And that was life-giving. And so I think the message I have here is, hey, number one, how human of us to be going through things in our life where we can feel lower and frustrated, because that's going to happen for you. But then how are we responding to it, with whether it be conviction or that alignment, and pulled towards the desires of our desired outcome versus staying stuck where we are? And that's the thing. It's like what you focus on, you will literally create your thoughts and you'll manifest that life. So if you're just negative and complaining, that's what you'll attract. And I was real time happened for me, like real time.
And you've been in personal development for years and years and years. We can go into some of the travel you had, your daughter's health issue
Yeah,
recently. She's okay now. Well,
yeah,
spoiler alert there. But
yeah,
this is not new to you. And so that's why we have to habitually, daily work on this, because no one is immune to falling back into old patterns when they don't continue to invest that time and commitment to their mindset.
yeah. You're bang on. I do a lot of work with Brendan Bouchard. And so for those of you that don't know Brendan, he's kind of the number one, number two high performance coach in the world. Highly sought after speaker, trainer, coach, 4-time bestseller, etc. But I spent time with him at his event recently, and he said exactly that, Kim. He said, he will still get distracted on his phone because it is engineered to distract you. It isn't because you're not strong enough. It isn't because you aren't incredible. He's like, I will get disengaged and I throw my phone across the room and I engage into something else. He said, because it catches you in your maybe a moment of weakness, or maybe you're just tired, and it just it does feel relaxing, right? To
Mhm.
be like, what's going on in this world? So it's not my world. But when we allow ourselves to have that, even the best people, let's say the best leaders, the most highly trained leaders, like how human of us, all of us can fall into that. So what you just said, Kim, was so important, that it's this daily devotion of how do I want to live my life? And this is a really great fact. And I think it's important for everyone listening, because I just believe, Kim, you have such high performers that are listening, and amazing humans, because that's who you are and that's who you attract as listeners, is that for every 3 minutes we're distracted, it takes 25 minutes to get back on the track of the focus. So whether that's emails, whether that's whatever that is. So just being cognizant of the amount of times you're either picking up your phone, or you're talking to your little one and you're on your phone, and it feels like it's this big distraction. It's really being able to master your attention, starting to become a master of the focus, because I always say, because I want this, I will do this.
Mm.
So I prompt myself in that, because I want to be a focused and attentive career woman, I will not pick up my phone during this time that I'm doing this. Or because I want to make sure my kids feel valued, when they come in the room, I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to put my work down. And I'm like, what do you, yes, how can I help you? Because they only need 30 seconds of my time, not 3 minutes. And instead of me putting them off for the next, and I've done this ever since they were 3 and 6. How can I help you? What do you need? You need a drink of water? Okay, let's go get a drink of water. And then you jump back in. But it's how you handle the distraction, it's how you handle the reaction, it's how you respond versus react. I find has been like actually life changing for me too.
And that consumption, I think it can inspire. I think it helped me with some fitness goals years ago where I got inspired to do a bodybuilding show because I saw it more accessible because of other regular people who have regular jobs doing it. So I think there is a good side to social media, but I think the overuse of it and using it to numb, to distract, and it is directly tied back to anxiety and depression. So I
Mhm.
think that that intentionality is key where if I consume your stories and catch up on your day and how your daughter's doing and that she got home to from the hospital that day, that's not numbing.
Yes.
That's true engagement and joy with it. And but there's it's you don't need a lot of social media to get that, and then you get off of it. So I just installed this new app a couple weeks ago called Opal, and you set specific time periods where you get locked out of whatever apps you set up. So you check off social, it automatically buckets Facebook, Instagram, uh, Google Chat, everything. And even I think your messages, so you can undo it where I need to get my text messages from my husband. And so I make sure removed that. But it's been life changing where there's only maybe 2 30-minute blocks of the day that I can go into those apps, and then when I am in there, I'm so much more intentional. Let me catch up, see how people are doing, and then get off. And I think that that's been really powerful. And in place of that, tying this all back together to Brendan Bouchard and your event in Austin, Texas that you went to, I was replacing those habits with better habits. So I signed up for Growth Day in the past. That's the app that Brendan Bouchard has. And he has a mini podcast every day for 10 to 20 minutes on a topic. And when I first listened to Growth Day and did the free trial a couple of years ago, I thought, oh, this is similar to the podcast I already hear with him and Ed Milet on Apple Podcasts for free. Why do I have to pay for that? And I just tapped out and didn't sign up. But then when I stopped the social media scrolling and set up Opal, and I'm very intentional with these 10-minute blocks of time, I started doing Growth Day every day. And now I get it where you need that repetition. If
Mhm.
you don't have the repetition, even if you've heard him talk about old friends, maintenance friends, and growth friends once, doesn't mean you're done forever. You need to hear that again, maybe monthly. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been in long enough to hear him rotate through these categorical topics that I just need refreshers on. But
Mhm.
I know that keeping up that habit will do that. And I'm on day 13, I think. So I've been doing Growth Day for 13 days and loved that. And I'm just doing the Daily Fire. I know there's a lot more functionality in there. And then Good Inside. I'm a big proponent of Dr. Becky Kennedy's work. And so she has the same thing, these cards they call them, where they're just little reminders of mantras and quotes and stories from other users in the app, and I'm on day 13 there too. So it was so amazing to see. I had the time that I thought I didn't, and
Right.
B, replacing that bad habit that has a deleterious effect the more you use it with a better habit was really cool. And just thinking about what other ways can I do that, and it just quieted the noise a lot in my brain when I did that. So I love how that all tied together with that, with the social media, with Brendan Burchard, with some of the work you do too.
I love that so much, Kim. And you know what's so interesting too? I do believe that Brendan and a lot of other thought leaders are on a crusade about social media. And I think you'll notice is it's really weaved through with distraction. And are we distracted? And I really appreciate what you said about numbing, because the numbing and the buffering, you're right. And then you also said a really important word called intentionality. So I love how you were so distinctive on that. Like these are my 30-minute blocks that I use for this, and I'm going in and I'm out. And that is such a, for those of you that are listening, even just like rewind and go back and just listen to what Kim just shared, because that's the difference. And it's not necessarily saying, hey, you can't go enjoy listening or growing. But when we are going down a slope that is actually numbing our minds versus training and growing our minds, there's really, your brain doesn't know the distinction in that. Like your subconscious doesn't know the distinction in that until you train it to be. And then the second thing that really appreciate, and Dave Conway, one of our mentors, our mutual mentors, taught us this: repetition is everything. So even for some, it's like so many, and I think there's such important point to mention this, Kim, is I think we live in a world where we want to be entertained. And so our attention span is like a goldfish. Like, and with AI coming in and all these other things coming in, it is really important for all of us to really armor our minds and really have discernment. Is this in alignment with my values? Is this in alignment with where I want to spend my time? Am I saying, and I really appreciate your honesty where you say, I do have time, I just was misusing my time. And I think that's one thing where, I have this time audit I love to do with my clients, and I call it the clarity clock, where we really want to have this idea of what am I actually doing and where's my time going? And you can audit your own time and become the steward. Like you're your own experiment. So it's like, give yourself permission to be like, oh, how long am I on my phone? Or how long am I on my app? Or, one of the things that's fascinating with your iPhone is they'll actually tell you how many times you picked up your phone.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to know that. Right. I'm like, I'm an addict. No. So it's just so important to be really aware of that. So Kim, I feel like this conversation is so important. And all it is just these little reminders. Hey, how do you want your time to go? How do you want to feel? How do you feel when you get off social? Do you feel filled up, like Kim said, where she's like, okay, good, they're home. I love it. I feel like I've checked in with a friend, you know, or like, what is that for you? So I think it's such a good conversation because there's such good distinction there.
Yes, and one thing to add on the app Opal, and I don't care, there's probably other apps like that out there, but just the functionality that it has where it can turn off the 24/7 TV channel that you feel FOMO
Mhm.
from. That's what's really cool, where the apps get grayed out and I think, "Oh, there's nothing going on there." And when you log back on 8 hours later, guess what? You missed nothing. You missed absolutely nothing. So it
Mhm.
it's hitting my subconscious saying, "You're not missing anything." And then when I see the apps are not grayed out, sometimes I'm thinking, "Oh, I don't even wanna go on it now." So,
Right.
it's breaking those habits, but when you first log on, it takes all your data from your, iPhone and tells you how many years it expects you to spend on your iPhone and looking down at your screen. And I won't go into names, but a couple people in the same mentorship that we were in said they screenshotted it and sent it to me and said, "This is traumatizing." It said 29 years, 31 years. Think about how many years you've already spent on your phone looking down at that awful angle for your neck that's not good for you, not being present with your kids, with everyone in your, I'm sure every
Yeah.
relationship in your life has probably had some suffering from us being on our phones. And mine too. I'm guilty of it as well. But thinking about that, and do you want to spend a third of your life staring down at a screen that is 2 inches by 4 inches? Or do you want to be living it in the real world? And what is the intentionality and the time boxing you can do with it?
Mm. Kim, it's so I've I've had chills like 4 times on our conversations. I'm like, okay, this is really good. So I have one practical tip that I actually teach all of my students, anyone that works with me. The first thing we do is we open our phones and you go to your notifications and you turn every notification off. So other than obviously texts from our husbands and kids, so like that's on, but
Mhm.
so if you were to look at my screen on my phone, it's only the picture of our family. And that really changed for me when I was working, when my children were really young and I would see an email come in or so you're right, you're constantly seeing, so you're like constantly distracted. I mean, I don't even have my phone near me now. It stays in my office unless I'm working. So that's been a really beautiful difference and change. Um, it's funny. I have a social media business, and Tessa loses her phone all the time. She doesn't even care, and people are like, "How is that possible that you don't have a 13-year-old that's on TikTok all the time?" And I'm like, "Because they're not my brand. They've never been pulled into my social media, and they are like, I also compensate them because it's a business. If they are in my stories, for example, or they are on that, they're like paid through our company into their account, because they're like, they've done something and now they're going to be rewarded for that because that's a part of it, and they've gotten consent and permission. So I think it's like really important for that, but they've never seen me just going and checking my phone. But that wasn't my reality. When they were little, I would constantly stop dinners and go answer the email. So that I've had to condition myself and train myself to think my values, my family, my values, my like, I want to make sure that I'm walking the talk. But for a long time, I was just constantly distracted by the notifications, Kim, that came in. Really important what you just said about the FOMO, because if you see like 19 people commenting on something, you will naturally want to go look at what that is just so you've got that peace of mind. But if you can't see it, it's not there. So when you go in and out, so that's one tip I have, is like shut your notifications off and get your life back and start living your life.
I love that. And I had this discussion with two friends yesterday where we have Slack, text messages, phone calls, voicemails, and then we message our same friends in these apps. It's supposed to be at your convenience, yet we think it's expected to respond real time for every single one of those channels. And that's not the case. If you flip it on its head, very rarely do you have to respond immediately. So the
Mhm.
app I have that is not muted is the daycare app, where they send a bajillion photos every day. So I get blown up on my Apple Watch with, hey, there's 12 new photos of your son in the app. But they also send messages, hey, he seems to be a little off this morning. We're keeping an eye on him. Or,
Yeah.
hey, today was they learned about wheels for the last 2 weeks. So they said, hey, every kid gets to bring a bike or scooter in and their helmet. Don't forget that. So those are important. It's not all of them are urgent, but I still check them all because I want to make sure. But other than that, you can probably turn off, yeah, 99% of them. And even at work, I see Slacks and I assume I have to respond right away to show I'm a good worker. Yet the Slacks are supposed to be at your convenience. If you're doing focused heads down time, then continue the focused head down time. But we have trained ourselves to just be distracted all the time and think we have to respond all the time. If someone really needed me immediately, then maybe they'll walk over to me, or some of them have my cell phone and they could call me, but no one calls me on their cell phone at work because it's never urgent like that. It's not that urgent. Within a couple hours within the workday is a totally acceptable response time. Yet
Mhm.
we're trained ourselves to immediately respond when all of these were intended to be at your convenience.
I love that so much. That's so important. And it's like really defining, what does that convenience look like for you? So are you going to be the person that gets back to the emails within 24 hours? Are you someone that is very responsive? Like, what does that look like for you? What does that feel like for you? So I think that's a really important thing. The other thing, Kim, that I would say too is, I remember when I was in a mastermind, and there was not the one we were in, another one, but there was a boxer. And oh, I actually still get um like, I get a subconscious hit when I think about it. There were 19 hours that I was behind on messages. So I actually, as part of my own coaching practice, I don't have Slack and I don't have Boxer in any group setting. We've got an off app based thing that will like comment, tag you in an email if someone's left a comment. So it's at your convenience, like you said. So I do believe that if you really do want to continue to deepen people's time and give people space to be working on their own things, anyone that's listening that's maybe starting their own business or maybe having their own coaching practice or whatever that is, have autonomy and respect for that, because that is very time consuming. When you're trying to catch up on what everyone else is doing, it takes you away from what you're doing. So remember, if you are a part of any of those things, you can opt out, you can mute those things, but also ask those questions. Hey, am I expected to catch up on things? Because a lot of people feel behind. I grew up for 10 years in the world of direct sales and direct selling. And part of that can feel very overwhelming when there's so many messages coming in for people. And my favorite thing was, turn off your notifications. You've missed nothing. You've missed nothing. Like, if you have a question, ask it, don't catch up. because it just gives that permission. And maybe if anyone's listening that needs that permission, either from what Kim just shared or what I just shared, is like, oh, right. We just think from a worth perspective, okay, I need to make sure that I've answered back every single person in order to be that good employee. But is that really part of that role that you need to do? Or is that what you think you need to do based on past conditioning? So it's just repatterning and maybe thinking about things differently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we could go on for 2 hours. So well, briefly touch on you have two lovely teenage children, a boy and a girl. I think cheerleading and football, the quintessential cute family, suburban family. And
Yep.
so you mentioned earlier that when they were 3 and 6, and you'd be super responsive on your
Mhm.
phone, you were building, you said, your first $1 million business at the time. And you also, I think, had a W-2 job at that time that you left at some point between now and then. So we'll try to connect the dots here. But yeah, I look to you as someone who has kids a decade older than me and in a different space than me, where I'm in the thick of it with a 3 and 5 year old. And I felt so seen on your listening to your podcast and hearing your husband say, "Oh, we watched our nephew," and I forgot how much energy it takes and all consuming it is. It's such a lovely blessing. And you guys get a dose of that toddlerhood now when you have teenagers and get to relive some of those moments and have new moments with a new family member of yours. But I felt so seen hearing that it's such an energy. It takes a lot of energy to keep up with a toddler, and just trying to grow a business when it's all consuming and all hands on deck for those several years. I just felt very seen and validated, and also that there's hope that things will get a little easier and change, and things will get harder and easier as my kids get older into the school age, into preteens, into teenage years. So yeah, feel free to latch on to any of that, of those topics, because I think there's a lot we could unpack here.
I love this topic. I love all of it. So I'll take you back a little bit. So when I worked in my gerontology career, I was like out of college and I was determined to, prove my worth and I can get this amazing job. And I did. I came out of college at 22, went into a managerial role at a senior's home, and I was the cruise director. Okay, this is like the most fun role. And I was the rec and leisure and like director of all activities. And I thought I had it made. Okay. So I loved it. So I would be driving my residents that had Alzheimer's in this bus. And I remember Joyce would always say to me, "I've never been in this part of England before." And we were like in Oakville. And it was just like my favorite thing to do. Right. But in for those of you that have worked in healthcare, you know that the pay is your second paycheck, and it's the impact and the long hours and putting in the time and working overtime is where you're really at. You are a servant leader when you work in healthcare. And I loved it. So I had no kids at that point. Obviously, hadn't even met my husband at this point yet. But I would work all the time. I held two jobs. I was a bartender and a server at the Thirsty Penguin. For those of you that live in Oakville, I was like the beer and wings girl at the hockey rink. Okay, and I was like determined to never. Nope, I was like off limits. Okay, because it was just like all these men. But that's where I met my husband, and I was like, oh my god, oh my gosh, this guy's so cute. I like have to like I switch tables and like shakily put down his Keiths. Anyway, we like finally met very serendipitously like 4 months later, and we've been inseparable ever since. And so I really believe we like got raised with each other, right? I mean, we've been with each other for over 22 years. And it was really fun. And at the beginning of our relationship, all we did was work, Kim. Like we worked and we worked and we worked. We just got it. We love to earn and to save. He's an entrepreneur as well. He started a dog company called Bark and Fitz, coast to coast. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, who's this entrepreneur? Because I always was an employee. So forever, I loved being an employee. I didn't know it felt nerve wracking to think I could do something on my own. I wasn't brought up that way, right? It was in my generation, not to age myself, but you could be a nurse, a doctor, or a teacher, or a healthcare worker or something, and that's all the choices you had back in those decades, right? Entrepreneurship was very, it was pie in the sky, but are you stable? Are you steady? And I grew up that way. So I grew up thinking I needed to work all these hours. And when I remember Kim getting pregnant with our son right after about 6 months after we were married. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a year off. Oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. Cause I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I never went traveling. I just went right into work. And so raising, we had Colby, and I kind of was working my way up that corporate ladder in my gerontology world. And the higher you move up the ladder in the corporate world, the less you get away from the impact and the service on the front line. And that was very challenging. So for anyone listening, I'm sure you can relate. But what happened was, we had an amazing one son, and then I had our daughter Tessa. And what I learned is that my mother-in-law was raising were raising my kids, because I was gone from, and it makes me very sad actually. Like, I missed a lot in the first 6 years of my kid's life. And at one point I realized, I was like, is this it? Like, is this what we're going to be doing, where I'm leaving the house and I'm missing all the, like, my dream was to be a volunteer at Alexander's. And I have a sticker from the visitors at Alexander Public School on my vision board, because that was part of my value, was to be more present in my kid's life. And if all I was doing was working this corporate grind and still living paycheck to paycheck, because we could never get out of the debt we were in from almost being bankrupt with when Jamie walked away from Bark and Fitz due to, unfortunately, a really bad partner. Like, how are we going to get out of all this? And it felt like, Kim, I felt like I didn't know where to go. And all I knew was how hard I work. In my head back then was the determinant of my productivity. So I built my first, like, business in direct sales and selling with this hustle and this terrified, we're going to lose it all. And I felt like being almost bankrupt. For those of you that have ever experienced that, you now know what it feels like to have a fall from grace, where you are rocking and rolling, driving beautiful cars to one car, and it's very desperate measures, and you're scrimped right down. So that was the best thing that maybe happened to us, Kim, because it gave me a perspective that, number one, saving is super important. Number two, it's not what you have. It's like truly who you are inside. Because if it's all taken away, like, you're left with yourself, and you can rebuild that. And we rebuilt. And I was so proud of how we rebuilt. So we've rebuilt a lot of times in our life. And that was really the cups, though, when I decided to move from, I'm spending more time on my corporate job traveling and spending more time away from my family. And that's when I realized I need to take a risk. And I ended up quitting and resigning from my corporate job, my gerontology designation, everything. I just finished an honors degree in gerontology. And like 5 months later, I put my resignation in. And I'll never forget, I told one of my family members and that I was leaving, to go pursue my dream. And he said to me, "Oh, thank God you're stopping that selling thing." And I was like, actually, no, I'm walking away from my corporate job, because my corporate job had a title. It was VP. It was very prestigious. It was like well known in Ontario, bringing in innovation awards, like well known. Right. And I decided to walk away from that because it wasn't actually fulfilling the impact that I knew I could have and the mark I was meant to live. And that was the scariest risk in my life. But my kids got their mom back. And then I knew I needed to build. So, it was really this, like, I didn't want to have those corporate handcuffs anymore, even though they were beautiful and I loved them and I loved being an employee. And I really honor being an employee. Like, sometimes I dream about it because I'm like, gosh, that would be nice to have 5 weeks vacation time right about now, where no one needs you because you're out of offices on. That's not our reality anymore. I know you and Dave understand this, right? But it's like, now I realize, but it is the dream. It is the dream to be able to do that for us, at least. And we've been able to build a lot of things out. So, it did not come without a lot of late nights and early mornings, but we were present all the other important times where we needed to be with our kids. So it's been really neat to be able to transition from the corporate world into a business world, and then building out my own company. Legacy by Kim came in about 5 years ago, which was funded really behind I lost my mom when I was younger, and I wanted to build something that was philanthropic, and I could have a give back perspective as well to women living with cancer. But that's really where, like, my own business, my own coaching practice, everything really started. Developing the journal, and just like really starting to evolve. So I started in selling and direct sales, but really that morphed into who's Kim and what's my brand. and what's my mission and how do I want to build that? And that's where really I would say, especially intensely the last 5 years, that my own next business was birthed. So it's been really, Kim, like this cool transition of what feels like a million lives, and a million different experiences and traumas that have been laced in between there. And, where I've had to just pivot and really go and operate from growth. Okay, what's my opportunity to grow here? What's my opportunity to grow here and heal and grow and heal and grow and heal and grow? And it's been beautiful. So that's kind of my trajectory. It's been like complex, but beautiful.
Oh man, I don't even know where to start to comment on what a beautiful story, because even there's so many details that I didn't even know from that. I know some of that, but not a lot. A lot of that was new to me as well. So bringing you to present day, something I think about is the word presence and what I see you being present with your children and going to your daughter's cheerleading competitions in Florida, I think, or even when she just had her appendix out, being in the hospital for what was it? Was it 8 days? She was there a while, right?
6 days, yeah.
Yeah.
Like just sitting there. And I just cleared my schedule. That wouldn't have been, you know, without its challenges, um, had it been back in the day,
Mhm.
wouldn't have been my reality. I actually, in fact, it's so interesting because I was so busy trying to prove my worth in that business that even all sick days Jamie had to take because I just couldn't not be there. I couldn't say I have to be a mom. It was not the culture.
Mm,
And that's hard.
that is hard. And I
Hmm.
think that's probably the case for people still. I'm in a progressive company where uh, I've had a lot of flexibility and freedom to take a lot of the sick days with Dave being an entrepreneur and my having the stable employee job and a very understanding, forward-thinking company. So I think that that's not everyone's reality, even present day, and I understand that and appreciate that because it is challenging when especially at these ages in daycare where they get sent home with fevers and everything very very frequently. It's just normal as they're building up their immune system. So it's been a blessing for me, and I understand there's these pros and cons with the PTO. And I said I have a 1,200 person company to shock absorb when I get a sabbatical. We do sabbaticals once every 5 years, and we're going on maternity leave for 4 months. And I think there's these pros that are nice. And then I also see some liberties that Dave has and people like you have with the entrepreneur life, but there you just have to decide what's best for you and what's best for you at that time. So it sounds like you've had your own trajectory and journey through employee and entrepreneurship. And there's also the downside to entrepreneurship with you said the bankruptcy. I didn't know about that. I did know he had a very cool boutique dog retail brand that people said, "Oh, this is very swanky. Like, is this from the US? And you guys are based in Canada." So also note that with your 1 year maternity leave is not common in the US. 4 months pay 100% pay is a big deal here. So I think that that's also very, I know my colleagues in Europe will also get that full year for parental leave, which is very beautiful to get that time. And I remember thinking, even with 4 months, wow, this is you get to live. I had fun on my maternity leave. We had fun and we didn't slow down before that. I think having a kid caused us to have a screeching halt with our schedules, with our journey, with our go, 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 be at the gym for 2 to 3 hours because Dave was very into CrossFit at the time. I was into bodybuilding right before I got pregnant. And just it forced us to have a big reset in a great way. And even now, with having those babies now be toddlers that are running around in high energy, we still try to have those restful moments and those pauses. And we had rainy, cold days in Boston, the Boston area on Saturday and Sunday. And it was amazing to hang out in our pajamas and just have movie days and bake cupcakes and decorate them and look at those as a nice thing. I do love the sunshine. And we were in Florida last month, and people joke about how they want to move to Florida instead of be in Boston. But I think that those resets are really helpful and important. And I don't mind being in a cold environment, in a cold climate, because we get to have the yin and the yang to it. And I even caught myself, I know we are very big on study and language and analyzing these words and these essays we read, but even I've been better about analyzing my own language and words. And I caught myself saying, I'm having a lazy Saturday morning instead of, and I'm changing that where I don't need the word lazy in my vocabulary actually, because I'm having a restful Saturday morning, a restful weekend with my family, because lazy for driven people like we are sounds negative. It sounds like you're doing something wrong. Whereas restful, we should be resting more because that's how we don't get colds and run down and lose our balance with and our alignment with our values is by taking those pauses. And so that was a very big awareness I had from last weekend with my restful weekend I had.
Mm. Oh, there's such distinction in that too. And it's so true because so many people shame themselves. Or it's like, I've gone off the wagon. I'm like, you're not on a wagon. You don't live in a wagon. You have no wheels that are coming off. You just are just stepping back into the values you have. I love that distinction. I think it's so important. And you're right about lazy because then that can make you feel like you're not doing enough. And I think when people have been tied to whether it be past stories or maybe you've been conditioned when you were little and told that you were a certain thing. So you've spent your whole life trying to not be that thing. You're still in prison. It's like I have amazing coach, and one of the things he said to me, it was recently, he's like, because I really related to it because I grew up in a home that was just very dysfunctional. And so this might relate to some of you listening, is like, so you're either going to be the rebel. So I was the rebel. Okay, I was the rebel. I was the troublemaker. I was like the black sheep of the family. But then there's the people pleasers, right? Then there's the people pleaser. I'm going to be the best daughter. I'm not going to get in trouble. Nope, I'm not going to. Right. And yeah, right. And but that what the distinction I heard, and it was so cool. It was so neat. He said, either way, both of you are in prison. He's like, because if you're just trying to be perfect for the person that you're trying to not ruffle feathers on, you're not living in your true self. And if you're trying to be the rebel and you're yelling, no, I don't want to do that to spite someone, you're actually going maybe against potentially what you really believe in. So I love that, to just kind of like tie a bow on that, Kim. It's like, yes, to what are you saying to yourself that's been taught that might be lazy, but no, you love it. And it's in alignment for you and it's restful. So just remembering that I love, we are so analytical, Kim and I feel like we're like little buddies, little very similar buddies, one from Canada, one from the States, meant to meet, but it's like, wow, I like that. I enjoy being productively restful, and that's enough. And what a beautiful way to look at it, rather than I was so lazy and I did nothing all day. But if you look at your day, Kim, you created the most powerful memories for your kids,
Hmm.
and those are basic
Exactly.
for them at 3 and 5.
Exactly.
Gift versus thinking you're so wrong and bad because you did not, like, wow, what a gift as a mom, like what a gift as a parent to just be like, no, this is so intentional and I'm going to teach my kids that they're so important and restful days are so important in their own nervous system. So I just love that. I wanted to give that like little bit of baked in learning of like, no, this is the deconditioning and the reconditioning, the refinement, right? Because refining is you're just refining what's already yours. So just
Mhm.
giving yourself permission for that. Oh,
Yes, and I can tell even in their short years of 3 and 6 years that we've rewired them in a good way, because I used to hear perfectionism in them, or they're just go go go, they're very high energy kids, and I found that showing them that I can rest gives them permission for that too. And I'm seeing them not get sick and run down as much either. The last 3 4 months we get messages from school, strep throats around, flu's going around, this that, they're not getting sick and I'm not getting sick finally for the first time in years. And I know it's all interrelated. And something I love about the perfectionism that you talked about, because that's the part I'm coming from, is I was even thinking this morning about how perfectionism is a ball and chain. And
mm,
Dr. Becky Kennedy says that anxiety, I'll tie these together, anxiety is being uncertain, and you're uncomfortable with uncertainty, and you underestimate your ability to cope with that uncertainty. And so when you try to ask a lot of questions, rationalize, which is my son, he has anxiety, then you try to prepare and avoid that uncertainty and think that'll fix it, where you really have to upskill the discomfort with your coping skills, and give power and say that you are able to handle this discomfort and uncertainty, and I believe in you, and you should believe in yourself, and that's how you help with anxiety. I think perfectionism is a form of anxiety. You are trying to
Mhm.
be so perfect and avoid all the discomfort and all the uncertainty, so that because if you do have any discomfort come in, or you screw up, or you don't get an A on that test, you got a question wrong or two, it totally derails you and you think, oh my God, I'm not perfect. I'm feeling discomfort and I don't know how to handle this. So I think
Mm,
of those are very interrelated for me. And even Brene Brown says that perfectionism is armor, and we use it as armor to protect ourselves.
yeah.
And I think they're all so related. And it's so, you said you are in prison if you are in the rebel stage because you're trying to do the opposite, or you're in the perfectionism people pleasing stage and you're just trying to do everything so flawlessly that you never have discomfort come your way. But
Mm,
that's a normal part of things. And we're teaching our kids it's okay to make mistakes. We have brand new finished hardwood floors, and our daughter loves puzzles. And I said, yes, you can go get a puzzle. She grabs the puzzle and scrapes it across the hardwood floor for 8 feet. And we're saying, no, stop. And we didn't want to scare her because yelling can cause is trauma. When people freeze up and say, oh no, what did I do wrong? You just yelled. So I said, hey, it's okay. Mistakes happen. Let's make sure we just carry the puzzle next time. You're a good girl. It's okay. Mommy makes mistakes too. And we were able to have such beauty in that healing and that repair
mm,
with her, and also teach her, hey, we don't do that. We don't want to scrape the wooden puzzle across the floor. And so just a beautiful weekend, a normal average weekend, a lot of time at home where we got to have these great lessons. And I want them to have memories of us just making cupcakes just because,
mm.
and they're making the frostings getting all over the place and just all messy, and they're eating the frosting straight from the frosting bag and saying, no, please, you've already had enough sugar. But those are some of the most beautiful memories where I want them to have that, and not let things be so uptight. It's okay for it to be messy and restful and beautiful, and to make mistakes, and honor those mistakes and make it very human. So it was just, yeah, a great example of that.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. I love that. I think you can never go wrong with owning up when you're like, "Oh, I didn't want to respond that way. Let me just like change how I did it." And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that I've learned is you don't need to be perfect in front of your kids. You just need to be a human because what you're doing is you're teaching them that flaws are normal and that you are in control. And I think one of the best things we did was actually move. We moved last year, and I've spent more time with my 16-year-old and he's gotten to know me and I've gotten to know him. And it's probably the best thing we ever did because we've now had more time together. And that is your most valuable asset is time. And whether it's 30 seconds, whether it's a minute, whether it's 40 minutes now, because we drive back and forth, but like time is so precious. And if you're not making the most of your time with the people that you love, then I want to ask you, what are you doing? Because I've been there where I've numbed out and I've worked 15, 16 hours only just because I didn't know how to handle the uncertainty of life that was unfolding for us. So I think it was a really good distinction, Kim, of what you brought in about like, anxiety is just like uncertainty and you're trying to control it all. Imagine just being in a place where you just are okay with that. That's also, being having clarity is important, but being certain is actually very dangerous. And I want to just pull that in. Like being certain is actually dangerous because then you are not curious. And if you lose your curiosity, you lose your edge for learning and you lose your performance edge. So be curious in your life, be prepared and be nimble, be flexible and be flowing. We are not a tree. You're not in these deep roots. You are flexible and nimble. And we get to like, I love this analogy. Barb Schmidt, she's an amazing author, but she talks about this mosquito. And she said, mosquitoes, the most annoying things in the world that will suck your blood. Also, in a storm, they fly under the raindrop. So they go with the flow of the storm. so that they do not lose and they don't die. They do not die. Mosquitoes are hard to kill because they are used to storms and they have to fly under the raindrops of the storms. Can we be more like that? Because we will have storms in our life. So, how can you fly under the raindrops and be there? Be like the mosquito that is there relentlessly. Right? And it's like, that's the goal. How can I flow in life storms? I'm going to slide under the raindrop and I'm going to be relaxed into this. I do not know the outcome of this, but I have to be prepared. And I think the last thing I really want to leave on this, Kim, is like, you, we, us, we're all in training for this life. And, that's my biggest, my awakening. Ironically, like I started a business 5 years ago and our whole life changed 5 years ago. And I had the honor of being able to be one of the people saving my husband's life, who's now here and amazing. And he suffered a cardiac arrest. Our daughter found him and I gave him CPR for 8 minutes. And if I can give any piece of advice for those that are really wanting to live this big life, is be prepared. Be prepared with how well you lead yourself. Be prepared that being uncertain is okay. Be prepared that, life is not infinite. Life is not. Possibility is, but life is not. And you have to live the life that you have. But most importantly, you need to create the life you want, because you are not guaranteed this deck of cards. You're going to be handed a deck of cards, but it's what you do with your deck of cards that matters. It's how you play the cards. It's not the cards you have, it's how you play them. So just remember that you are in charge of the cards you're holding. How are you going to play them? How are you going to train for them? How are you going to lead through change and chaos? Because that is life. And when you know that life is hard and you can start to get through the fact, then you can do anything. You can do anything. I really believe that.
Such a beautiful note to end on. And speaking of time, I want to be respectful of your time. And I'm definitely going to have you back because I do want to talk more. We didn't even get to the story of your husband and saving his life and that new lease on life. It seems like you had this boundless energy before that, but I'm so curious to hear that change, how it changed you and your family dynamics. So there's so many beautiful stories to unfold here, and people can go find it on your podcast, which brings me to my last question, which is, where can people find you?
Yes. So I like to live over on Instagram. I'm just finding myself on LinkedIn. So that's fun over there. So you can find me with my name, Kim Fitzpatrick. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. We've got a great podcast. Like Kim said, my husband and I, and he's alive, by the way, very happy and alive and healthy. So grateful. He was in the 6% of survival, and we're so grateful. So that's called the Fitz Life Unfiltered. And you can find us very unfiltered over there. And we're all over podcast, Google, Spotify, etc. And our new website is coming, and we're really excited. So if you see Jamie and Kim Fitzpatrick website, it's under construction, but the rest is coming. So yeah, thanks for having me, Kim. This has been such a rich conversation, and I'm excited. We're going to put this on our Fitz Life Unfiltered podcast too. So for those of you listening to the end, you get to meet my friend Kim. So that's so exciting too. And we'll be able they'll be able to see where you are in the show notes and all that good stuff. But Kim, I'd also love to give the link to the time clock, the audit. So people can actually go and audit their life, if that's helpful for any of your audience listening. It's just a free workbook, and then you can kind of do some of that work and look at your time and where your time is going. So I think it's really relevant to all the things we talked about today, Kim, and I just really value our conversation. So thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. The clarity clock, we can definitely share that. That's one of the tools that mentors have encouraged me to do too. The first thing they say is see where your time's going. So I love that. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much, Kim. Thank you to our listeners. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And thank you for tuning into the Balancing Ambitions podcast. As always, if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review, because when you leave a review or share an episode, you make it easier for someone else to find us and benefit from these stories and tips we share. There is a link to everything we talked about in the show notes. Thank you all for listening to the Balancing Ambitions podcast, and have a beautiful day.